Guys, I just want to thank you. Another week, Juan, with us together. Jack, thank you for coming by.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. We've got to share a lot of conversation throughout the
Yes.
last year or so,
Yes, we
and
have.
so I've gotten to know a little bit about you. But here, we're about giving insights to anybody else that's watching outside of these four walls.
Sure.
To bring them into our community. And so, you're a business owner. You've got your jewelry store and any other endeavors that you have
Sure.
going on.
Yeah.
And so I'm just fascinated to know more about you and that journey, how it's been.
Okay. Yeah. Listen. It's been a crazy ride, right? I think I've been probably working since I was about 14. Started with my dad. Um, I remember there was actually one point where I would be in high school, and I would take the bus right outside of my high school, right? Instead of taking that same like New Jersey Transit home,
Sure.
I take it straight to like Port Authority, right? And then from Port Authority, I would just walk to 47th Street, which is like the Diamond District,
Right, right, right.
and from there I would spend hours, right, every day. So it wasn't just like oh, I did it twice a week. I was there every day, including Saturdays. During like the holiday season, I was there 7 days a week, and this is starting at 14 like years old.
Okay.
So I'm 35 now, right?
Yeah.
So I don't like to say I have like 21 years of like work experience, 'cause that's not fair, right? Right? We spent a lot of time in school, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like I would say probably for the last 18 years,
Okay.
I've been heavily involved in retail, right?
Okay.
Specifically, our business, right, jewelry.
Yeah.
And I don't like to call myself an expert by any means, right? Because I'm always learning, right? And my business in general is multifaceted, right? No pun intended, right? But it is a multifaceted business, and there are so many levels, right? That you can't know everything, right? And you try to, I guess, like become like familiar in every aspect of like your business, right? Same like you guys, right? You try to immerse yourself,
Yeah.
right? But what happens is you eventually lean towards a specific focus, right? And I would say in the last 2.5 years,
Okay.
I know what I specialize in, right? So I just had mentioned, right? 18 years I've been doing the same thing,
Long time.
right?
Yeah.
And I would say 2.5, say call it 3 years, right?
Okay.
3 years, I found my focus, right? So, when people say you got to pay your dues and you got to climb up like the ladder, right? Sometimes that ladder, right, wobbles,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And as it wobbles, you got to, refocus and go back up like the ladder, right?
Yeah.
So that's happened, multiple times. And I just feel like that once everything was filtered in like my life,
Yeah.
right? It was actually very clear to me what it's more what interests me, right?
Okay.
And that's what I put all my focus into, and that's what I've been actually running with. And I can say that any business owner that puts his 110% into his business, right? You reap what you sow. That's exactly what's gonna happen. Yeah.
I love that, right? Because, you're talking about you've been working since you were 14, 21 years of experience. And what I'm seeing is just the journey and the process that is taking you to a complete transformation. I love the fact that you use the context of years, right? Because it's so important that a lot of people understand that real success and real entrepreneurship really does happen over time. Our languages, they continue to evolve. And what I mean by that is that earlier today I was speaking about health and education, but on a global level. I was speaking at the United Nations, and that's the kind of journey and process, but it's because I've been consistent with what I've been doing. But even as you're consistent with what you're doing, what I love is that you just basically said that your avocation has been jewelry.
Right.
But what I love is that once you have that clarity, right? Because avocation is like what we do as we discover our vocation, which is what we really love to do. And vocation is such a stronger word than passion, right? Because that just means that you really synthesize a process, you really synthesize a vocabulary, right?
Right.
Because these 2.5 years, that section of that industry that you've chosen, like that's like, all right, this is where I'm putting my real specific knowledge at.
Yes.
Because this is what interests me. And I'm probably pretty sure that on that journey, the language has completely evolved. But I want to take it even a step further, because a lot of people, they're going to think that it's just about the work that you do and how good you get at it, and how amazing of a product, you actually put out there. But the real product, right, has been yourself.
Correct. So this was my focus, right? Right. My focus was myself, right? Because what I realized is everybody can sell you a ring, everybody can sell you a chain, anyone can sell you a watch, right?
Sure.
But I'm not the one that's selling it to you, right? And what I pride myself in is the fact that me personally, I stand behind every product, right? I make sure from beginning to end, I've done full, quality checks, and I put like 110% into that product, right? And what happens is, I'll give you a little like backstory, right? So when you're younger, you tend to look at, competing businesses, right? Like your competition. You wanna say like, oh, like say for example, like Gift Fitness, right? What's a gym across the street or down the street doing, right? So what happens when you do that? You distract yourself, right? You distract yourself and you distract yourself, right? And when you distract yourself, in my opinion, you're losing time and money, right?
Sure.
Specifically, you're losing time, right? Money you'll get back, right? But I believe there's ebbs and flows to like business, and you lose $100 today, but you make $1,000 like in a couple days, right?
Sure.
So we have no issues that way. Time is, I think, more precious than absolutely anything else, right? And when you distract yourself with what the competition's doing, and then you distract yourself with, wait, what is the competition actually spending, right? And what I mean by that is, what are they buying in terms like merchandise? Well, this particular jeweler invested X amount into watches. Jack's gonna do the same, right? So what did that do? Now that stretches me thinner, right? So when I first opened up my shop, I had 18 watch brands, right?
Okay.
So imagine I have 18 sales reps that come into my store monthly that don't come in for 5 minutes and say like, oh, everything looks good, I'll be on my way. They come in for hours, 18 times a month, okay? Imagine all that time wasted, right?
Can only imagine.
After the pandemic, as I started filtering my brands, after after like the pandemic, after we actually like reopened, I decided to let go of all watches. My focus, my bread and butter has always been jewelry, gold and diamonds. That's my thing, right? From custom pieces to like bread and butter pieces, we'll call it, right? And that's what I put my focus in, right? And I developed myself even, right? Continuously, right? And I'm very hard on myself, right? Some people are like, you know what, you'll do it better next time, right? See, I'm not like that. I take everything so personally, right? That it bothers me, right? When I don't do something like right or like the proper way, right? And that's why, like Juan was saying, right? In those 2.5 years, right? What I focused on was myself, right? And when I developed myself, I developed a better product, not only for my customers, I just develop just a better experience for everyone, right? I'm a happier person, right? And especially in retail, customers get a sense for when someone is, if you're sending out like negative vibes,
Right.
people feel that,
Certainly.
right? So if someone's coming in to shop for the, one of like the happiest times like their life, right? They're gonna go get engaged, they're gonna get married, and I'm an unhappy person, I'm gonna put that negative energy on that relationship, or on at least on that customer experience, right?
Yeah.
And you put the kibosh on the whole thing, and so that's why, right? We have to like develop ourselves, right? So those 2.5 to 3 years, I took the time, and that's exactly what I did.
In the process of you developing yourself, what has been what you've learned, like the standout that you would say is like, okay, this is what I'm taking, or this is what I've added to my knowing as an individual?
So I would say, I can confidently say, right, that no need for distractions, right? That's what you have to take, right? You have to take that you don't care what your competition's doing, right? Because the competition is not you, right? You can't, right? The only person that you're competing with at the end of the day is yourself, right? I want to become better, right? I'm not saying I want to become better because Joe down the street's becoming better, right? I want to become better for myself, right? So the first thing that you have to do, right, is separate yourself from the competition, right? In my mind today, there is no competition, right?
Yeah.
Gift Fitness is the perfect example, right? How many gyms have you been to throughout your life?
Well, I think I'm one of the one of the few that haven't been to many gyms. This is my first experience in a gym.
Okay. Juan, how many gyms have you been to throughout your life?
I've been to over 20 easy.
Okay. So in the 20 gyms that you've been to, right? And, I can answer this question by myself, right? There's nothing like Gift Fitness, right? There's no competition, right? There's one Gift Fitness, right? So when, that type of like mentality, that type of model, right? I took something very similar, and this is how I'm developing myself and my business. Because at the end of the day, I realized that when you're shopping at Danson Jewelers, right? You're shopping with Jack Nazi, right?
Yeah.
I am Danson Jewelers, right?
Yeah.
So I don't need to worry about absolutely anyone else. I worry about myself, and that's all that matters, right? And I put 110% into myself, so I can give that 110%, back to the customer.
So I love that, right? Now let's add to that, because right now, and what I see in your journey, because you're now focusing on this one area part, and I love what you said about no distractions, because everyone thinks that distractions are just, let's say, Instagram, social media, people who are going to be talking about people or events, or even sometimes people who talk ideas and there's never any execution, right? Because that's also a distraction. Ideas are meant to be executed. But what you're doing now is because you got this focus area and you're developing the specific knowledge, and totally, how many you guys have decades in the business, right?
Yeah, about 40.
40, right? So you're taking 40 years of information. Now you're taking it to a modern time, right? Because the idea of concepts maybe started 10, 15 years ago.
Sure.
So what you're doing by you developing yourself, and you developing, the 2.5 years, and when we talk to specific knowledge, is a concept about yourself.
Right.
And by developing that concept, right, what you're definitely developing is the right conduct and behavior for the customer service for the people that you serve. And then what ends up happening is, once you have a concept, then eventually you're going to be able to replicate.
Right.
Because a concept is something that is a creation of something that doesn't exist. And what I see right now, you're you're in that path that dancing jewelers is going to become this level of creation for the world, and you're about to just completely separate from the rest because no longer are you looking left or right by not looking at the competition, which then, right, is such a powerful thing because what that means is that now your ideas aren't getting diluted with anyone else's.
Right.
So everything that's coming is uniquely you.
Yes.
And by it being uniquely you, a concept will be born that you will eventually step away from and replicate, and then go and tell the story,
Right.
and then transfer the information from that concept into other industries.
Right.
Because we all need, this understanding where we go do corporate talks, we go do talks at colleges, we go do talks at schools, because it's amazing to teach passion, but passion needs to be taught with vocation, right? It's amazing to teach purpose, but purpose needs to be taught with environment and culture, right? Because ultimately, if purpose is what we do for others, what kind of environments and cultures are we creating around ourselves and around the people that we serve, right? And then, even when it comes to the idea of contribution, right, we need to teach giving. And I mean, why giving? Because contribution is just a big word, right? A lot of people say, hey, you gotta make a contribution to the world.
Right.
But the reality is, if you don't understand giving and you don't understand giving on a small scale, if you can't take up a little detail like giving, how would you ever take care of a big detail like contribution? So right now, you're on this path where you're about to completely, chances are, innovate the whole jewelry business.
So I can tell you that so I was probably working with my dad for, I don't know, I would say figure 10 to 11 years, okay, straight, right? I've worked for other people also, right? But with my dad, I worked about 10 or 11 years, right? And then we decided that, you know what, I have to spread my wings and kind of like go off on like my own type thing, right?
Sure.
So that's when I opened up my shop, right? I mean, you've been to my
Yeah,
store, right?
beautiful.
Thank you. But like you just said, it's uniquely me, right? You see my personality as soon as you walk into like the store, right? You don't. It's not a typical jewelry store.
Okay.
It's not traditional by any means, right? I realized that if I'm gonna be here every day, right, for X amount of hours a day, I need to be comfortable in my own environment,
Sure.
right? And that was like the first like step, right? But when I first left my father and opened up my shop, um, I had no concept. I had an idea, right? But I didn't have the proper execution at like the beginning, right? So I kind of went in almost like blindfolded, right? When I took off the blindfold, then I realized, wow, like what kind of mess am I in right now, right? Because you just made a financial uh we'll call it an investment, right?
Sure.
Was it an investment? I don't know, right? But we'll call it an investment, right? You made a financial almost commitment, okay?
Yeah.
You put all your eggs in one basket, and you had to start from scratch, and you kind of hope for like the best, pretty much, right? And then you tend to see what not to do, right? So as you're walking this journey, right? You listen to some people. I don't, I'm pointing at you just because you're sitting, but I'm right. But you listen to the person that tells you one thing. You listen to a person that tells you another thing.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, you're like, well, both these ideas are not what I want, right? Both of these ideas, even though like they seem nice, right? And they build you all these castles in the sky type thing. Most probably, like when it's as they say, right, when it's too good to be true, it usually is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly like what happened in my case when I first opened up my shop. As time went on, I weeded out a lot of people, right? A lot of relationships, I just like ended them. Most of them, good terms. I mean, I have, no real issues with people,
Yeah.
right? But you have to do at the end of the day what's best for you, what's best for your business, and what's best for you in like the long run. What's your end game, right?
Yeah.
And if someone's gonna stand in the way of your end game, you gotta weed them out, right? And like like we were saying, all these years of experience, right? That say my dad had, call it business experience, right? Um, might not have been the experience that I needed for myself, right? Because the time when he started was also a very different time period, right?
Sure.
There was no internet, right? That's the biggest thing. There was no internet, right? Consumers just like didn't know what they know today. Um, there was a lot of variables, right?
Sure.
And what happened was when I came in, the internet was growing at a fast speed, right? Social media was growing at a fast speed. And now the variables that my dad had when he started are completely different than what I have,
Yeah.
right? Not saying that that like the reactions and the experience, will be too different, right? But it's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be like different enough where you know starting business in 2015 to 17 is different than starting business in 1980,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like it's a completely different shopping experience. People walked in that time, and people were buying gold, chains, earrings, rings, etc. Right? Today, people are buying things with diamonds, so with gemstones, daintier things. Customers come in, they want things, consumer specific, right? What you want me to make, right?
Right.
Right? At that time, business was very different, right? And now you have to listen more to the consumer. At that time, you told the consumer, here you go, right? The customer was like, great, this is exactly what she wants, right? Yeah, you don't know if she's gonna like it or not, right?
Yeah.
But that's what you had, and that's what you're gonna take, right?
Wow.
Right now, there are too many options, right? And what happens is, for an average retailer, it can get very overwhelming, right? So you have to not just weed out your like vendor like relationships. You have to weed out your merchandise. You have to start thinking about what does the consumer want. How does the consumer want to shop? How does Bruno want to shop? How does Juan want to shop? Right?
Right.
How do you guys want to shop in 2023? Right? Do you want to come in and talk to me, or would you rather text me and tell me what you want? Right? Sure, I have a website, but through the website you send me a message. Right? I'm gonna be the one that's gonna answer you. Right? So it's like, how many sales have I made via text message? Right? Jack, this is what I'm looking for. Right? When can you have it? 1.5 weeks, 3 days, 1 day, 2 days, whatever like the case is, right? Many people don't want to be bothered by actually physically getting to a car, driving 15, 20 minutes to wherever they got to go, spending an hour of their time trying to figure out what they're buying, right? It's like almost going to a car dealership, right? Do you want to go to a car dealership and spend that 6-hour time period between negotiation, picking out your car, figuring out what the monthly price is, and then when you get to the finance office, every number that you had on the paper now is completely different, right? Oh, I'm sorry, sir, you don't qualify for this, right? What a waste of time, right? Nobody wants to shop like that, but that's how my dad's time was doing it, right? They'd go back and forth, back and forth. I mean, I'm getting frustrated talking about it, right? But today, it's more streamlined. It's quicker. People understand things. There's no guessing games, right? It's like you show me what you want, here, done, right? No more questions, right? So that's how I'm trying to continuously make my business streamline, right? A to B, no A B C D's, right? Right? We're not here to like sing the alphabet for you, right? Right? We're here just to connect two dots, right? And that's the innovation I feel like that my business is gonna need, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to innovate.
No, that's what you're doing.
You know what strikes me as a curiosity, because you mentioned 47th Street, New York, a young boy, 14 years old, or very young, and I don't know that area very well. I actually visited it very recently. A business friend of mine, he's in the industry with rappers. He does jewelry for them and things like that, and so he brings me along to 47th Street maybe like 2 weeks ago, and it strikes me as an adult, it strikes me as a very quick, fast pace. There's a lot going on there. It's very almost hush hush. Like there's a lot of doors to go through and things like that. So what I'm curious to know is like how a 14-year-old maybe not just wound up in a place like that, but stayed motivated in something like that, or like what drove you through that? Because I could only imagine that it must have been, a challenge.
Sure. So you can ask any of my friends from childhood, right? Bro, I'm a natural born hustler, right? I was born a hustler. I'm gonna die a hustler, right?
Okay.
That's just how my brain works, right? Like, I could take this. I can go outside right now and sell it to someone, right? To me, sales is not an issue, right? What drove me, right? What motivates me is the hustle, right? I get like a adrenaline like rush almost, right? So even as a kid, right? I used to hustle Pokemon cards, right? As a kid, I used to hustle video games, right? As I got older, right? I started going to like Swatch here at what's called Garden State Plaza,
Sure.
and every so often they'd have a big sale, right? And I'd buy men's watches, right? A couple $100, right?
Yeah.
I'd buy men's watches, keep them in my locker in school. Girls would come up to me and say, "I need something for my boyfriend." Ah, here's a watch, right? Right?
Yeah, that's cool.
I was always into it, right? I was always into buying and selling, right? Like the whole like merchant mentality,
Yeah.
right? I feel like I was a merchant from a very young age, right? Some people show an affinity for art. Some people show an affinity for, sciences, right? Some people show an affinity for math, right? Engineering, architecture, etc., right? My affinity was the hustle, right? And as I got older, I saw how family members who are in like the same business, right, were hustling, right? And I ended up making a connection with someone on 47th Street at a very young age. And I would go there, like I said, right after school,
Yeah.
and I would be like their, I guess like runner.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jack, go take this to this guy.
Right.
Jack, go get this polished. Right. Jack, go size this ring. Right. So I would take it. I would run here, run there, go do the exchanges. Right. I would take diamonds from this guy, go bring them to that guy. Right. For 2 years, I didn't get paid $1. Right. 2 years, I would go to the city out of my own pocket.
Yeah.
Right. I don't remember what the bus was at that time. Right. But I would pay that on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
I would go to 47th Street at least 6 days a week, right? Not including holidays, right? And for 2 years, right? From 14 to 16, I got paid $0, right? My treat at the end of the week on Saturday with the person I was working for would buy us lunch, right?
Yeah.
That was that was my treat, right? And I wouldn't get paid, right? But the friends I made on 47th Street, right? the connections I made, right? The way I saw deals happen, right? This one guy who was right next to the guy I used to work for kind of like befriended me, right? The guy had to have been I was young. The guy had to have been in his mid 50s at the time,
Okay.
right? Or at least that's what it looked like. Maybe he was younger, right? But, in my 14 to 16-year-old mind, the guy was,
Pretty
old, right?
Sure.
White hair, old guy, right?
Right.
Right. But that might not have been the case. He taught me all about diamonds, right? He wouldn't let any person, right, beyond a certain point. I was the only kid that was able to go in, sit with him next to him in his office, right? The guy had maybe 3 safes, 4.5, 5 feet tall,
Yeah.
full of diamonds. And he'd show me one by one. Tell me the difference between this and this, right? He'd go one by one, right? And he like befriended me. As I got older, after I finished high school, I went to a GIA, right? It's a Gemological Institute of America. And I did a program called Graduate Diamonds, okay? And when I did that, I was ahead in my class. And the instructor at the time was like, how do you know? Right? I was like, because you guys are using microscopes to look at stones. I did this every day with my loupe and my eyes, right? And I did it over and over and over and over, right? So by the time I got to the school, right? Colors, clarities, all these, cuts of like diamonds, right? I was able just to drop it in a piece of paper, right? I would flash some light on it, and I knew exactly what I was like looking at, right? I'll tell you another quick story, right? One time we had a little box of it's called a set of master stones,
Okay.
right? For colors, okay? And the master stones were all set in a way that gave you the color scale from like D color, which is like the best in like diamonds, to like I would say maybe it was like a M color, for example, right? Which is much yellower, right? Like the lower on like the color scale. So I was talking to a customer one time, and I talk a lot with my hands. I don't know if you noticed it, right? And I knocked the box over. Okay.
Wow.
And the diamonds went everywhere, right? So in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, how am I gonna put all these back together, right? Especially in the order that they're supposed to be, right? They're not marked. It doesn't say like D through M, right? They're not marked. How am I gonna do it? I put a piece of paper out, I lined them all up, and I put them, right? My dad tells me, Jack, why don't you just go get the box that they came in at the bottom? It says the weights and the colors. All you have to do is weigh it and then put the color. We weighed each stone. Each stone came out to be exactly where it was supposed to be.
Oh, wow.
I did it all by eye.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
So, to break that down, right, and just put different labels on it so people can have another perspective on it.
Yeah.
Let's start with the word hustler to entrepreneurship.
Sure. Yeah.
We're a natural born entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
End of the day, right, what we understand about this world, that everything is about transactions, right? So you went into retail, and from retail you went and you started at school with the watches, but that just also information. Somebody went, you observed, right? Because as we observe and we see things, we automatically adopt. And you must have seen somebody sell. You were like, hold up, why can't I do that? Then going further, right? I love what you said about your dad earlier, because even when your dad, like, you learned his way, right? But you knew that what you learned from him was for him.
Yes.
Because we all understand that, change is always going to happen in the world, but growth is inevitable. And end of the day, you understood that you were going to grow into a different market. So you went and you started acquiring all the information that you needed. So when you were working in 47th Street, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
47th Street, when you were there, it was amazing because end of the day, you didn't get paid for 2 years in that lunch, and I still think you owe them money. Because the reality is the education you got there, right? It's such a big understanding that we need to to have is that sometimes, like, we education is a must for everybody if you don't have access to the actual doing, right? So if you go to college, it's amazing, right? Because you get the information, but you never got the practice. You
Right.
instead had the opportunity to enter and get the practice. And as you were going from store to store, you were collecting this, you were collecting that, you were learning, right? And you learned, and everybody taught you, and everybody gave you information, and everyone was explaining this, everyone was explaining that. You got a lot of practice at looking at diamonds, and that's phenomenal, right? So, but let's talk about what you really got from there. Let's talk about the relationships that you built, because
Right.
then from those relationships, end of the day, right, you automatically know who to go to when you need to make this kind of deal, and who you need to speak to, who can help you structure a deal, who can help you make this deal that comes to you actually happen, because they actually might have the product. And at the end of the day, now you became a middleman, so now you were even using all these relationships, and you knew this one had this, and you knew that person didn't know where it was at, but you knew where it was at. So
Right.
it's like, hold up, I'm gonna go and do this, right? Then let's talk about the last story, which I'm really, really glad that you added, right, with those diamonds and how they fell over. Now let's talk about those who have eyes can see. And what that means is that when you work so hard at something and you do repeat, and let's go back to that concept of Aristotle. We all repeatedly do. Excellence then it's not an act but a habit, right? You got into such a habit of looking at diamonds that you were just able to see it.
Right.
Where most people, like, they have to go to the steps. And now let's go even further. Let's talk about how far your mastery's developed too, right? Because you developed that at such a young age, right? How many years ago was that story?
That story was probably right now, maybe 15 years ago.
15 years ago. So that's very important, right? And I want to really throw that detail in there, because 15 years ago, you were able to, by eye, put all those diamonds together, right? And put them where they have to go. And now think about that. There's a lot of successful jewelers out there who have had to have gone, they have to gone in the box, they have to gone in the colors, the weight, and make sure, right? So from 15 years ago, and that's what you can see back then, what can you see today, 15 years later? Because
Right.
the best part is that you said is that you never stop growing. So just imagine the things that you can see. And now, and even to the point where now, right, because now my mind is going, and it's the kind of thing where I'm really wondering, what are you going to create? Because at some point you have to be able to create some type of program and curriculum, because I am sure that there's only things that you can see. There's a lot of jewelers out there who can't see it.
Sure.
And what they really need is, if, let's say, Albert Einstein said that, genius is being able to explain something in simplicity, is you need to simplify that for the world. Like, at some point, it's either you go through the place where you're going to do franchises, and then you're going to teach, and through the idea of apprenticeship, or are you going to go and put everything and you're going to put that in some type of program and put that in some college. But for me, I have to ask that the world needs for you to impart your mastery into it, because that level of, of mastery, right? That's really the ultimate contribution. You can make all the money in the world, you can make all the donations in the world, but for a human being to create that level of mastery, and then to be able to impart it into the world so that others like yourself that have that same interest can then go and take it further,
Right.
Priceless.
Yeah, I can give you an example, right? You can go to jewelry stores, right? Right. And we're talking jewelry now just because I'm in it, but the same concept can be for absolutely any business, right? You can go to jewelry stores and you ask them a question, right? Go to any salesperson, right? You see a ring in the showcase, and you're like, but what if you made it like this? You made it larger diamonds, larger size, wider, higher, different color, using higher clarities. They'd have to get back to you with a price in a couple days, right? I can quote it on the spot, right? I've done it so many times. Modifications, changes, colors, clarities, widths, sizes, shapes, you name it. I've done it so many times. I can quote it on the spot, right? That's the difference, right? You don't have to wait with me, right? I can just, and then I can envision the process of making, right? Because while I was on 47th Street, I experienced a lot of manufacturers, right? I've been to like jewelry factories, right? And I saw their A to Z processes, right? And I know how certain things are done and the proper way to do things, right? So once you see that, once you have that in like your mind, you can, you can take that and kind of implement it to what you have with like the customer, right? To that, ring in like the showcase. And what happens is you can quote the customer based on your experience, right? And a lot of people say that, you are only what you've experienced, right? But if you have the chance to broaden your horizons, right? This is also another thing about jewelers, right? They don't like to broaden their what's it called, horizons, right?
Yeah.
They like to always walk with blinders on, right? Unfortunately, that's just how a lot of jewelers are, right? I know from my dad, and I know from other family members, they don't want to evolve, right? So now my dad comes to me and he asks me, how much would this be if, right? Because I took the time. I went and I studied with certain people, right? And I saw how certain things are done, and not just certain things, the proper way to do things, right? This way, you can properly quote the customer, right? You're not just pulling numbers out of thin air, right? You're putting it together the right way. Less headache for me, complete satisfaction for you, right? Because at the end of the day, you got to marry your girl or whatever, right? I don't want to marry the piece, right? I don't want you to keep coming back to me, Jack, problem. Do it the right way, right? Measure twice, cut once, right? So that's the way I like to do things.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredibly fascinating, Jack. A lot of what you mentioned there for me is exactly what I was trying to uncover, because that's everything that I've experienced. I've realized that the relationships that I keep, the people that I know, and what most importantly can I offer to them that in turn, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, it pours back into me.
Sure.
And I, find value in whatever I help them with, you know what I mean? So that's incredibly fascinating. I thank you for sharing that.
Of course, yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to leave anybody, that's watching with a last bit insight,
The last bit of insight. So if there's somebody that's willing to, you could call it mentor, or to give you that bit of attention, right? Or to answer your questions consistently and honestly and all the time, hold on to that person, right? For me, that's been my brother-in-law, right?
Okay.
So
Fascinating.
my wife's sister's husband, right? Anytime that I come to him with a question, he'll give me the honest answer, right? And he'll tell me like the right way to do it, right? So if there's anybody in anybody's life that is willing to take the time, and like I said, call it a mentor or a teacher or somebody that's just willing to spend a little more time with someone, hold on to that person, right? Because at the end of the day, when you become successful, right, it's almost like it's almost like that person became successful with you, right? So it's like, like he helped me, and he's always helps me, right? And I don't forget that, right? So it's like, don't get me wrong, as much as my dad helped me, right?
Sure.
It's always different when there's someone that takes the time to answer your questions, right? Our parents maybe come from a different generation. They come from a different country, right? They come from a time that dads were dads and sons were sons, and there was always that line of separation, right?
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes you get more attention from a friend or from somebody at the gym or you know, like a brother-in-law, right? So my last bit of insight is if you have those kind of people in your lives, hold on to those people.
I love that, right? Because when I think about this environment, you know, this is exactly what it's about. This is a melting pot. You know, this is Stoicism, all the great minds and philosophers meeting at the market. Like, this is our marketplace that we share with the world, right? Because the best part is it's all great individuals that have added into this community and this culture and this environment. You know, and lastly, the most beautiful word I can really come up with, this is a renaissance of thinking, of independent thinkers, of decision makers, of people who come up with ideas and execute. And, you know, these conversations are starting today. I can only imagine how they're going to evolve 3 to 5 years from now, and ultimately, how many things will we create, how many concepts will we enhance, and how much inspiration will we leave to others to follow their dreams. Because ultimately what we're